really pleased to have a chat with someone I haven't met before, actually, but I've been highly recommended because the podcast title is obviously Building New Realities, and we're hearing more about metaverse action. So yeah, delighted to meet Theo Priestley for the first time today. He is the founder. I put founder in Chief Punk, but you're the founder of MetaPunk. I'm adding Chief Punk to that. We'll see where we go with that. But yeah, really lovely to meet you, Theo.
Yeah, you too, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, cool. So we were recommended to speak by a mutual friend, Bertie at Virtual Umbrella.
Yeah.
And then obviously when I looked at your site, it's kind of all orientated around, MetaPunk and Metaverse. And obviously we'll probably get into the dissection of what that term means to you, because it's having a bit of a moment in the sun. Yeah. But yeah, just to sort of find out a bit more about you, just from my own personal understanding as well. What was your background, and sort of how did you get into this world, and how would you describe the world in which you operate?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been in the technology industry for about 20 years in various guises. I've worked with technology companies. I've done some consulting myself, mainly on go-to-market strategy, marketing, communication, storytelling. I've worked with startup accelerators to basically help startups on that journey as well. Go to market fit, what are they doing? Why is it now? Get the story right. A lot of the technologies that I've been involved with have been in the sort of B2B enterprise space, so IoT, cloud, AI, big data, all those kind of sort of things, and VR and AR, and now it's all just kind of sort of coming together under this big umbrella called metaverse. And I think for anyone listening, but metaverse isn't a new term. It goes all the way back to a novel by Neil Stephenson, and if you also cast your mind back to the early sort of 2000s, Second Life, for example, is a prime example of a metaverse that has existed for nearly 20 years now. So we have seen the metaverse in some incarnations. It's only now in the last, I would say, couple of years, it's starting to really sort of take flight as a digital extension of our physical reality. And I think I need to sort of make a call here and say it's not all just about us running around as avatars, jumping around in Fortnite. The metaverse also has its roots in enterprise simulation, for example. So you could take whatever you do in manufacturing, or certainly for smart city environments and things like that, to actually simulate using real world data and real time data to see what would happen and see various scenarios play out. And you could essentially build a virtual extension of our world in at scale, and then simulate what would happen in it. So there's lots and lots of different avenues and connotations relating to metaverse that go beyond just the entertainment side.
Now, why do you think metaverse is having a moment in the sun right now? What do you think? I mean, it literally feels to me like in the last 6 months that it's just sort of had a bit of a turbocharge. And that could be because of sort of the COVID effect. Obviously we talk a lot about digital transformation, digital living, like what we're doing here has just been massively accelerated. But I wonder what your view is on why it's having it sort of 6 months in the sun, whether it's going to last, or quite often with these fads, they sort of come and go. There was a really interesting or tedious debate around whether something was MR or XR for a number of years, and everyone just seemed to sort of ran out of steam, that argument, because nobody really cared anymore. But conversely, it feels like metaverse, we're actually growing into the phrase. It's like the phrase has been around a long time, the concept has been around a long time. And you mentioned Snow Crash, and I actually had started reading it again on Saturday in the pub. I was like, I haven't read it for 20 odd years. I better dig it out again. And I was like, I've forgotten the bit that he was a pizza delivery. That's like the whole crux of it, is that he's the delivery guy. So yeah, why is it having the 6 moments in the sun? And is it something we're actually growing into? and therefore there'll be a bit of faff around it, and then it will die down, but it'll still be there.
Yeah, I mean, so addressing the first bit, I think Facebook's announcements have kind of sort of thrust it into the limelight, and saying, we're now a metaverse company, and of course, everybody's like starting to pay attention. The reality is that engines like Unreal Engine, that's made by Epic Games, Tim Sweeney has been thinking about this as a strategy from day one, to be honest. I mean, everything that he has done so far is kind of slowly moved the company towards the metaverse, and he's been talking about it for a number of years. So like you say, it's been bubbling away, and I think a lot of the technologies and the underlying infrastructure is now at a stage of maturity that they can come together and start building properly. And the level of fidelity and what you can actually do in these virtual environments is starting to become that where it's more engaging and more immersive. So like you said, you've had the XR, MR, VR, AR kind of sort of conversations. We're kind of at that stage with the metaverse where everybody is trying to hang their own definition and their own vision on this term, and we're going to go through probably about the same amount of pain as the realities industry has, which is 5 to 10 years of people trying to be the one who coined a particular term. 5 to 10 years of vendors basically putting out marketing that is their particular spin on what a metaverse is, and then 5 to 10 years of trying to understand what the interoperability standards and protocols that we need to in place to allow all of these different virtual worlds to interact. Because the key thing around this is the metaverse is the big overarching term that encapsulates all these virtual experiences and virtual worlds and things like that. It's not just there will be a Facebook metaverse and there will be an Epic metaverse. It's just, this is everything. It's the umbrella term, and everybody will build a universe within that. But how do we get those universes or whatever you want to call them to talk to each other? How can I, as a user or as a inhabitant, if you want to call it, or a player, dip into one and then sort of like go, okay, I've played around, I'm going to go into the other metaverse now, this other metaverse in the corner here. How can I do that in a seamless fashion that doesn't involve me coming out, looking at a web browser, logging in with another set of credentials, picking another avatar, that kind of thing? So I want to be able to, the way you walk through your house, I want to be able to walk into different rooms or different metaverse, different virtual worlds within this house, the same way I walk through a door. That's how easy and seamless it should be and feel. And we're a long way away from that, unfortunately, but the beginnings are there. And we're being teased with that just now.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion point for people who have been in the game for a while, because one of the points you touched on there, you hear about, it's about the interoperability. It's about and I think the analogy there you used about being able to move between different rooms of your house is a good one. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because if you look at like us going on to a different website, you've always got to log in, right? People always want to go, you're in a slightly better, shinier space now. I do think the barriers to logging in have got a lot easier, right? With all like all the Google and Facebook OAuth kind of stuff, for you to be able to use different profiles. That's almost metaverse like, and of course the Face ID on Apple products has still sort of delights with its ease of use. But I think there will always be a change when you go from one, or certainly for the next a number of years, when you go from one space to the other. So potentially all this interest around metaverse and what it actually means is that it's more like a sort of min spec. And what it means is, when you are in this space, you will be represented as an avatar. You will have interactive capability. You will have persistence. You will be able to pass objects back and forth. You will have a level of presence within the space. Potentially for the next 5 years, perhaps perhaps there's more like metaverse-like qualities
Yeah.
that help us kind of explain what kind of a space it is. Like this is a metaverse space because you can do this, rather than it's a just a mobile app. Although of course, something we work on at Future Visual is making sure people on any device can be in a metaverse space, because we don't want it just to be a barrier around VR. Yeah, interesting. So what was sort of the early projects that you worked on that sort of really helped shape your thinking around either metaverse or just it feels like it's more the in some ways it's been the theory of what these spaces could be that's been your professional passion and interest. And is there a project you can mention that really sort of allowed you to sort of up the ante in your exploration of what embodied or metaverse like spaces could be like?
I don't think there's ever been one particular project. I mean, I got exposure to VR startups working with HTC Vive X, their accelerator. And that was really interesting to see what they were doing. And in fact, there were a couple of people a couple of startups who were already thinking about avatars maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And so you could see bursts of, I guess, inspiration and how people were thinking about tying it together. And then, I've worked with, on projects where we look at IoT and real-time data, and for simulation capabilities and being able to do predictive scenarios using machine learning. And again, there from an enterprise space, that's where you could see the kind of sort of inkling of where things could go, not just running simulations purely just looking at the data, but actually visualizing that at scale in a virtual environment. So whether, like I said before, whether it was like a machine doing digital twins with in manufacturing or oil and gas or the energy industry, or smart cities, for example, and that on the B2B space, or the people were playing around with simulations for business process management using 3D virtual worlds, and watching the actors actually going around what they were doing, kind of programming little actors to basically carry out these business processes to see the effectiveness of making small changes or room layouts and things like that, how that would affect timings for actually doing the work. So there have been little pockets here and there. And of course, you've got the video game space, which is entrenched in building huge virtual worlds that people interact in. And of course, a lot of the metaverse inspiration, I think, today comes from the video game industry, in building those worlds. And now all we have to do is kind of sort of marry the video game inspiration with practicalities of using real-time data from the real world, and then bringing people into that to see how they basically want to live and play. I think the other interesting aspect with the metaverse is this idea of play to earn, or certainly not just play to earn, but the ability to carve a career in this virtual environment where you can actually earn money by doing what you do. And this is essentially what has happened in lost the train of thought just then. Second Life. That's it.
Yeah,
Second
I was
Life.
going to, and there's kind of a more contemporary example, be like Rec Room.
Yeah. But Second Life has been, has allowed people to basically build careers out of that, whether it's designing furniture, designing clothing and stuff like that. And they've made real money out of those things, or hosting events and things like that by building virtual environments for events. So, we've seen examples, very early examples of how you can make money. And of course, game streamers like Twitch and things like that are another example of the creator economy and people making money from that. And now we're seeing people doing this with NFTs. So exploring what an NFT could mean. So whether it's designing virtual or digital clothing, accessories, whether it's selling pieces of artwork that you could eventually hang on your space in the metaverse. These are all exploration and early examples of where this is actually going to go.
Yeah, which space are you sort of most interested in or excited by in terms of sort of metaverse application? Is it enterprise or consumer?
Um, Interestingly enough, I think the vast majority of the innovation for the backbone of the infrastructure for the metaverse will come from the B2B side, from the enterprise side, and that's where companies like Nvidia are playing with their omniverse, because they dub it as the pipeline for the metaverse, and essentially that's just basically going to be everything your plumbing is going to happen there for all your data and stuff like that. The consumer end is where you will probably see most of the manifestation of the metaverse, so people being able to jump in, interact, and things like that. And we'll just see a lot of crossover in terms of the innovation from each type seeping into the other to help build it in a more concrete use case.
Mm. And when you think about this technology and the opportunities it can offer, what's kind of your personal aspiration for the field? You know, would it be, and obviously you've nailed your colours fairly early to the to the metaverse term. Yeah, what would be your aspiration in the field? And it could even be, you know, the pedagogy of metaversians. What area would you really like to see develop?
I would love to see develop. So, I mean, I think where we are right now, I think in the next sort of 5 years will be a you know, if you want to start talking about generations as a kickoff, there'll be a generation that is born into using the metaverse as a native um, way of interaction. So where we were born with web, you know, another generation was born into basically, you know, the iPhone, the iPad, and swiping and everything else like that, and apps as their native sort of playground. There's going to be a generation that'll be born natively to know what the metaverse is and play and instinctively look back and go, well, that was the web. I don't want to play in the web. I want to interact in 3D and things like that. I would love to see, you know, younger people getting involved really early in this, whether it's as, you know, designers or creators, and they're the ones that are leading the exploration of this space. If you look at Benjamin, who was the young guy who created an NFT. What was it called?
Was it the Wales series?
It was the Wales. Yeah, it was the Wales series. Yeah, I mean, you know,
incredible, isn't it?
You know, that's where where some of the exciting stuff is happening, where kids are just getting, you know, learning about it and then creating something and then going, oh, this is great. This is actually quite easy for my generation. Let's do something more with it, kind of sort of thing. And you know, I think all the sort of bursts of creativity and the idea and the really good ideas will come from that generation, not from us who are like, you know, old farts now. And you know, and are coming along for the ride and helping sort of build it. I think the real sparks of how that generation will create an economy around what we're doing is where the real inspiration will come from. And so we need to start thinking about, well, how do we take them on that journey? How do we allow them that creativity? What do we need to think about in terms of education? So our education is very rooted in old-fashioned, you know, parrot fashion, learn from a book, learn from the teacher, blackboard kind of sort of stuff, even in 2021. And I think the educational sector is far behind where the technology is leading us. And we need to sort of adapt that to, you know, that education and allow them to explore, you know, outside of the education or outside of the curriculum, what it means. I'm personally building something which I can't talk about, unfortunately, but I am actually building a project which it has metaverse qualities at this point in time, and I think it's a really exciting time to get involved in it at the early stages. And I think the more people who want to get involved, I think is the better, because once we start building more and more, we'll know what works, we'll know what doesn't work. And we want to get involved in early with those conversations around interoperability and making sure that we don't create more walled gardens with our own efforts, kind of thing. We want to be opening up and having those discussions with everyone else.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, obviously with things moving at the pace they currently are, you can see a logical thread for, digital build lessons or digital build being a part of the curriculum. In that particular example with that young kid Benjamin, it's almost like creating a sort of specialized school, isn't it? You can see the logic for, well, let's really examine what creating within a digital only environment. I just don't mean a bit of coding, I mean the actual the destination is the place where they will also do the building. Because I think with what you mentioned about the creator economy, we didn't really see that coming. It's one of those sort of things that sort of incrementally kind of grew. And you look at the creator economy now and some of the economics behind it. I mean, it's just staggering. And these people who are just creating really great careers, from that digital space. But it feels like something that's not going to be adopted by the mainstream, and by that I mean the government put together education programs anytime soon. But it's so easy for people to do this stuff from home. That it's going to be really interesting, because you will get this kind of fast-tracked group of young kids who, if they enjoy it and if they want to do it, I think the story behind that kid with his whale NFTs, he wasn't jumping on the bandwagon. I think he actually had a purpose, didn't he? He was trying to raise some money for I can't remember whether it was animal protection. Anyway, it was something pretty cute. And I think part of with the NFT bandwagon sort of growing so quickly, I think something else it highlights or puts the microscope on is looking at your motivations for doing things. And I think that's happening perhaps in a quicker or deeper way. Like we're always aware that you want to be your motivations want to be coming from a artistic space, or you want to be having a clear purpose on it rather than just jumping after the buck or jumping after the latest NFT. So I think it opens up a world of looking at the particular moral reasons for your work and efforts.
Yeah, I think for at the moment, the current NFT craze is very much a kind of cash in, jumping on the bandwagon. I think when you saw the initial successes of CryptoPunks and Beeple and things like that, I think everybody thought, I want a slice of that. I'll make some money out of this. And there are some NFT projects where I kind of think, or certainly the art projects, where I kind of think it's a bit like hot potatoes. You don't want to be the last person holding
that's one holding it. Yeah. Or it's emperor's clothes.
Emperor's clothes. But I think once we get past the art form, in a sense, and we are in a world where the NFT has real utility and value across a number of different contexts outside of just art. So if I sell you something that becomes an asset that you can use in a virtual environment, and you could take that asset and put it in another virtual environment and have use and utility out of it, and it gives you some kind of satisfaction from using it as well, then that's that's where I think the NFT world starts to mature.
Because at the moment it's just sort of trading card.
It's
on
we're
steroids.
Not seeing that. Pretty much.
Absolutely crazy. I mean, one of the exponents of trading cards, I see, Gary V, which is fair enough. He did trade baseball cards when he was young, allegedly. But I saw him at Christie. He's doing his Christie's drop, and I don't know if you saw the art work.
No. I've avoided those kind of sort of things like the plague, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, so it's sort of shades of Ponzi.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, there's you can see that there's people who have been doing it for a couple of years, and like, great, fair play to you. You know, you got involved in that space, and you just the timing has come at the right moment for you. I think Beeple actually is a great example. I commissioned Beeple to do some work like 10 or 11 years ago, and you know, he was giving everything, you know, putting all the source code for everything up. And, you know, when I chatted to him, he's the most lovely, easy going person, a bit like the persona you see. So I actually thought, in terms of sort of karma of motivations, that his work going for the amount it did was completely appropriate. It's like, you know, who else would have been giving their work away for that long?
Yeah.
He didn't have an ulterior motive to go, hey, if I give this away, I'm going to be able to capitalize it into this persona. That's just kind of who he was. So good on him. Yeah, I mean, in terms of working for clients, how have you seen the sort of aptitude or the interest in metaverse as a destination? Has it always been around it's sort of either innovation led because they've had innovation money, or because they're trying to solve a problem, which can be access to you know, difficult scenarios, or has it been in just trying to sort of keep their organization at the forefront of technological developments? What do you sort of typically see the motivation as?
Yeah, I think it's more to do with innovation and PR than any kind of sort of real practical use case. I think the investments are normally led by, you know, someone, you know, like a chief innovation officer, or someone with a budget. They've been given a budget and they've said, try and work out how we fit into this metaverse thing and come up with a proof of concept. And they get funding for that. It's never been a case of we have a concrete use case, especially this early. So it's more exploratory. So at the moment, you're seeing a lot of luxury brands, for example, exploring the space and saying, you know, how can we get our, you know, digital fashion? How can we start creating digital fashion that people want to be interested in? Because this is a new audience that we need to tap into, you know, and that kind of makes sense. You're not going to see a bank going into the metaverse and saying, how can we put in a digital ATM, you know, and get a presence here? So brands, I think, are either looking to explore from let's build a virtual world around our brand and create brand new experiences around that and see what happens, you know, like Louis Vuitton did with their Louis Vuitton world and things like that for the 200th anniversary. Or it's exploring, you know, how can we do some marketing and advertising in a completely different environment now? So, you know, we've done, you know, web banners, we've done out of home, you know, this is now a new environment that we can create some immersive marketing experiences that leads to a purchase. How do we capture that audience and that sort of market share with this different sort of in different space? How can we create an immersive ad campaign that isn't just a banner advert floating in a 3D environment? You know, we need to build something that's more concrete around that. So brands are looking to sort of create experiences as well.
Yeah, there was the launch last week, wasn't there? Selfridges, I think, what's it called? Eco City, Electric City. Did you see that one?
No, I haven't actually. No.
Yeah, quite a big splash last week, and it was cool. But you know, it was all browser based. But it did make me think, like, okay, is this a flash campaign? 15 years later, you know, it's like, yeah, neon environment with some nice props, some kind of avatars. But it did. Remember when the flash campaigns came out, 15, 20 years ago, and it was like, wow, look at that. You know, the animations were incredible for what you could get in the bandwidth at the time. And so part of it felt like that. But I think the way you just described it is in, they're just trying to do a marketing campaign in a sort of new genre, because it was, it was a shiny looking metaversey type space. And then there were lots of links for merch that was probably by a virtual influencer.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, that's an interesting strand. What's your thoughts on virtual influencers, virtual, let's call them celebs, the rise of the virtual celeb, the rise of the algorithm driven virtual celeb?
Well, we've seen examples of that already. There are people who are basically using their own kit to generate, full motion capture for avatar-based, influencers. So, whereas people sit on a Twitch stream and just sort of like, and you're seeing them, people are now basically creating 3D avatars of themselves and using motion capture to actually animate it. And that's taking off, and of course you'll have that extension in a metaverse context, which is not just a 3D avatar that you can just see doing something and advertising or whatever or engaging. You'll see people actually in the virtualized environment itself acting the same way. So yeah, I mean, it's only going to get more and more prolific as people want to switch over. The rise of TikTok, or I should say the decline of TikTok and Instagram influencers will naturally move towards this sort of virtualized 3D environment where you can be more engaging with your fan base.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a Pandora's box, isn't it? And it is sort of aligned with some of those sci-fi books we would have read 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, humans are pretty simple in one way. You're just like, here's the script, and off they go and build it.
Yep, it's just cycles.
Yeah. I wonder how much of sort of metaverse activity will actually sort of help with human happiness or human wellness, because a lot of it's just driving forward, isn't it? It's like drive forward with entertainment, drive forward with stuff to sort of fill our attention with. And, at what point will we go, well, yeah, this metaverse activity is increasing wellness. But I suppose, wellness as a sort of indices is not often, rated that highly.
Yeah. Well, we've seen the negative impacts of social media, whether it's misinformation or whether it's depression, loneliness, isolation. I mean, it's helped people connect, but at the same time, it's also driven people apart. And the metaverse, in a sense, could create its own set of problems in terms of that. People will want to isolate themselves and just be represented as an avatar rather than actually go out and socialize in the real world, or it'll create a different set of addictive behaviors. So obviously we've got the scroll, we've got the like button, we've got the retweet button. You get that hit of dopamine every time you get a little retweet or something, someone likes your posts and stuff, and so you want to keep posting something similar. You might want to behave a certain way in the metaverse that gets you lots of attention, and that's your dopamine hit, and that creates that addictive behavior where you want to continue to act this way because that's what people expect of you and stuff like that. So while the metaverse allows you to express yourself, and however it should, I should say, allow you to express yourself in whatever shape or form that you want to be. You don't have to be a human avatar. You could be a cat or a coffee mug or something like that, if that's what you want to be represented as, or even just like a point of light. Don't have to have any physical kind of 3D representation at all. I think we will be driven to behave certain ways for the same dopamine effect that we've had just with the web 2.0 and social media and stuff like that.
Point of light, that's a cool avatar. I've never thought of that one.
Yeah.
Coffee mug I get, but yeah, point of light. Nice. Have you ever tried any of the sort of wellness type apps, like Trip or any of those?
No, I've not, but it would be interesting to see how that would translate in a proper immersive environment rather than just an app.
Yeah, the Trip is a VR.
Oh, really? All right. Okay.
It's a VR based one. Yeah. All right, cool. So we were talking about avatars, point of light. I liked that, and then if you'd have tried any sort of VR meditation apps, which you said you hadn't. Yeah, there's one out there called Trip. Yeah, I mean, I think part of the sort of phenomena with these kind of activities, because I'm sort of quite a fan of meditation, is quite often people go, let's build it in VR, and something like meditation, you really need to do it in the physical world. Otherwise, you're just watching TV and listening to someone speak. So there can be a bit of a rush to try and find a sort of metaverse-like solution to so many things. What are your sort of favorite experiences? Do you hang out in places like VR chat or anything like that? Where do you spend your time?
I've been in VR chat a couple of times. To be honest, I mostly spend my time in video games. Even though I enjoy the VR experiences, it's just I'm more of a gamer at the moment than actually just hanging out and socializing. Because again, there's still not that kind of draw for the mainstream to want to come in, or they come in and they go, okay, now what? And so you've got the Roblox experience, you've got the Fortnite experience as well, kind of sort of thing, and they're giving you early hints of what you can do in these kind of sort of environments. But for the average person, I think it's really hard for them to sort of understand and be pushed into exploring and doing something that's meaningful for them. I think it's the same with like a lot of sandbox games. Unless there is direction and you're constantly fed something to do, I think most people sort of like get bored and log off. So there's especially, it's plus you've got the barrier to entry when you've got you have to wear VR headsets and stuff like that. So there is actually a financial barrier for mainstream adoption, which is why I think browser-based entry is actually quite critical for getting mass in the mainstream first of all.
And what do you think will be those kind of tipping points? I mean, interesting, like yourself as a gamer, like what kind of games are you into, and what would be the sort of tipping point? Do you think of? Would it be a social immersive experience around that game, or what could you see as points of interest that would sort of help usher people in?
I mean, I love MMOs and MMORPGs because of the expansiveness of the world and the world building that goes on in there. And there's plenty of things to do, whether it's just like little quests or whether it's lots of nice things to look at. And I think a lot of things that will appeal to people is, are the crafting experiences that you can get. So, if you taking the pieces of the environment and building something, and that should appeal to people really interested in the creator economy in a sense. If people are building those experiences with that in mind, where you can take constituent blocks or whatever elements or resources from the world and craft and build and shape things and then sell them on, then I think a player driven or inhabitant driven economy is a key aspect, which I think is missing from some of these as well. So if there's a reason for me to make things and I can make money from these things and sell them on, then you're creating economies and industry and things like that. And business. And I think that's quite a critical component for the metaverse going forward.
And obviously Second Life's a good example of that. What are other good examples of sort of in-world creator economies that where you thought, oh, they've really got that right, or that's really given people a reason to be in there, a reason for enjoyment, and there's been a sort of financial upside for them?
Well, I mean, if you look at Roblox, for example, there's been examples of people building things in Roblox and actually selling them on a market somewhere. You've got the Sandbox as well, which is another MMO type NFT driven game. There's also an older traditional MMORPG called Entropia Universe, which not many people have heard of, but they've actually had a player driven real world economy in the game for nearly, since about 2008, I think, because they registered as a financial entity to allow people to essentially take the money that they make in the game out as
Take it
fiat.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was before anything to do with cryptocurrency. I mean, it's purely fiat based, but it actually gives you an idea of how, I guess, how mature some of these ideas already are, but just not widely known.
Nice. What kind of, are there any kind of theories that you've come across that you particularly resonate with you? Like, I really love Solomon's paradox, which is where it's easier to give someone else advice than to take advice yourself. Like, it's very easy to go, oh, you need to do that, that, and that. But
I'm terrible at that.
Yeah, well, every human is. You can just see into other people's problems really clearly, but try and apply it to your own, and you might just go around in a loop. But anyway, any sort of general theories, either around artificial virtual living or beyond, perhaps something to do with cooking?
To be honest, that's I can't really sort of think of anything other than Murphy's Law.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good one. Shit happens.
Well, yeah, I think that's especially if you're trying to build something or get involved in where the world is going. You either make the right call or something bad's going to happen. It's just that there's never that middle grey ground at all. So anything that can, or anything bad that can or will happen,
Usually will. Yeah. And don't be offended when it does.
Pretty much.
A bit like your brakes. And in terms of sort of books that you've read over the years that have stuck with you, I mean, obviously Snow Crash and probably Neuromancer and a couple of books like that are top of anyone's list who works in this field. But what are books that you've really enjoyed?
I read a lot of science fiction, and I mean, my bookshelves, which are hidden away just now, are just full of sci-fi. And in fact, I've got the old analog pulp science fiction magazines. They're a small form with the sort of 70s pulp art cover on them. I've got 600 editions of that.
Wow.
From like the sort of early 50s all the way to 2010s. And they're just full of fascinating stories of future visions, just sci-fi in general, that kind of sort of thing. One of the books that has actually stuck with me for a long time was Gateway by Frederick Pohl. And he also wrote Man Plus as well. And then there's, I Am Legend by Richard Matheson and things like that. I mean, all the old school science fiction I really enjoy reading. Now, I've got a signed copy of Gateway because it really is and it's nothing, I wouldn't even say, it's not genre defining like Snow Crash or anything else like that. It's just a really good story. And it just stuck with me. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. So that's one that I would recommend people have a look at.
Very good. And obviously in sci-fi, there's such a rich, particularly the ones you're describing, is such a rich genre of artists as well. People doing all the illustrations. Are there any artists that you'd recommend?
Yeah, so so Chris Foss, Sid Mead, bless his soul, he's now departed. Fred Gambino, there's Wayne Hag, there's Colin Price. There's a few others who have done those kind of sort of illustrations, but I actually got to speak to Sid Mead and Chris Foss a couple of years ago for a specific project. And those kind of sort of old school artists really kind of sort of appeal to me because where you have a lot of techno utopian visions in concept art and everything looks very sterile and stuff, their artwork was either very grungy and dirty and felt lived in, or it was really colorful, and I love that kind of period for artwork.
Yeah, Sid Mead stuff. I mean, pretty iconic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lovely work. Okay, going slightly off piece now. If you could have a billboard in the middle of a town, and you could have any words on it, what would those words be? So it's basically a free advertising space for you.
Advertising space for me. I would waste it completely on something stupid. One of the best phrases I ever heard in a video game was from Half-Life 2, which was from the G-Man, and it was the right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So I'd probably just spend lots of money just putting that up for no
Putting
particular
up
reason.
abstract craziness.
Yeah.
Nice. And if you had 100 million to spend on a social program with no red tape, what would that look like?
Oh, there's an interesting one. 100 million. I wonder how far that would actually go in a social. Yeah, it would be social housing, or it would be somewhere in sort of sub-Saharan African state where trying to give underprivileged kids access to education or something like that. You know, I think homelessness and education go kind of sort of hand in hand. Just access to better services to allow people to feel better about themselves, and you know, and to give them the opportunities, you know, to better themselves as well. So those kind of initiatives, I think, have far more value.
Yeah, because there's a trap, isn't it? If you don't have those, if you don't have housing, if you don't have education, you don't have self-worth. It's pretty difficult space to
Yeah.
progress from, whilst we're all flouncing around talking about what a digital metaverse looks like.
Well, that's it. Yeah, we're sitting in a very privileged position here,
Yeah.
talking about this kind of sort of stuff. And obviously, this recording or whatever will be heard or watched by people in a similar position as us, because we've got access to all this gear and all the right technologies. But you know, I think we should be using, you know, that kind of cash as an opportunity to lift other people as well.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Theo. It's been really great to talk to you, and
Thanks, Tim.
I know you've had a busy week, so yeah, thank you for fitting us in, and it was really great to talk to you on building new realities.
Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.